Hello, so I keep getting interrupted because I'm actually expecting a delivery. I'm at someone's house lah, house sitting for them, waiting for delivery. It's a long story. So I'm just going to move on to the next episode, which is looking for a house. So assuming you've cleared the next hurdle of deciding whether you want to have a BTO or a resale, for BTO, you're not going to have a lot of choices lah. You normally have to pick with whatever that HDB offers you, and that's normally determined by location and size and budget. So now for the more complicated steps of getting a resale. So the first tip I'm going to tell you is that don't use an agent if you're only buying. You can use an agent if you're selling and buying because you need to you're doing contra lah. Because if you want to sell, you have to use an agent lah because only agents can advertise on Property Guru, or I think the other portals also probably the same. But if you're only buying, then it's actually quite straightforward. And the agent of the seller will also kind of answer your questions, but they cannot act for you because it's a conflict of interest. So you have to do everything yourself, which is to put up all the paperwork, negotiate by yourself lah. Okay. I think if you do sufficient research, you should be able to handle it without getting an agent. That's my personal feeling, and I think we all did it successfully before without using an agent, and it's fine. So don't waste that commission money lah. Okay. Okay, so for me, what I will firstly ask you to consider will be, of course, you must consider your budget. So get your HFE done so that you know what you can afford. Do remember to set aside money for renovations. Of course, you can always do what I did, which is to actually do renovation. Okay, my initial plan was actually to renovate bit by bit. So that's one thing you can do. But bearing in mind that resale may probably come in a condition that's not so nice. Depends on how willing you are to live with it lah. I've got someone I know who actually bought a house, and then at first they thought they were just going to keep the floor, but as it turns out, they couldn't accept the floor. The floor was actually in very good condition. It's actually marble or something. I cannot remember. Marble lah. But it was a very ugly brown marble. So in the end, I think they overlaid vinyl. But overlaying vinyl is still a cost lah, and it's not exactly cheap, especially if you choose a luxury vinyl plank, which is the better quality. So you sometimes, when you like a house, I'm not saying don't go for it, but you do have to take note that sometimes when you are trying to buy a house, right, you may fall into the trap of convincing yourself that, oh, I can live with it. But in the end, right, especially when you are doing viewing, you're normally in a rush. So you may think that, oh, never mind, I don't need to set aside money for renovation. But I think this is not wise. But if you do, then you just bear in mind lah. If you later change your mind, don't know lah what's going to happen. Because for me, I thought I can do a simple one, but as it turns out, the house was in a far worse condition than I remembered. So I ended up like almost practically bankrupting myself lah when I in the end when I finally proceeded with my renovation. Okay, so the first thing I also did was to narrow down the location. So this is up to individual preference. If you think that you want a very specific area, then okay lah, you go for a very specific area. If you are more open to more areas, then of course you can go for whatever area you like. But what I can suggest to you is, when I bought my house, a lot of people were buying houses as well. So I can share with you what their experiences are so you don't fall into the same traps. I know someone who bought a house. They bought it because of the greenery. But however, I think the very commonly overlooked aspect of buying a house actually is transport. Not only transport, but also multiple transport modes. So what I mean is this. Firstly, I know someone who regret buying the house despite the so-called the greenery aspect was because actually the bus stop was very far. Not only is the bus stop very far, it was very inaccessible and you have to go up, down, many steps. So it's definitely difficult for someone with mobility issues, which their parents have lah. So now they regret and they're looking for another house. So I tell you first lah, make sure your house is accessible via multiple transport modes. Not only public transport, but also private transport. Why do I say this? Same person, the car park, right, is very inaccessible. Need to up, down, a lot of stairs They forgot to consider this. Not only that, remember it's the same person whose bus stop was very far, right? So okay lah, the car park still not that bad. It's still generally more accessible than the bus stop. But the problem was that, what happened was they decided that they wanted to sell the car for various reasons. So end up their main mode of transportation became public transport, because initially when they bought a house they had a car, they had one car and one motorbike if I'm not wrong. So in the end when they bought the house they thought, oh, they have a car, so it's not so bad. But what happened was, the person decided they didn't want to drive anymore, so the car stayed unused. And because the bus stop is so far, right, then end up every time when I go out must grab. Then that's a lot of cost. That's one thing. I have another example. Someone bought a house. One of the family member is really cannot walk one, very difficult to walk. The car park is very, very far. So sometimes when you are buying a house, you cannot just look at the house. You need to consider the things other than the house. So other than the typical things people will consider, like, oh, amenities lah, whether it's near some kind of heartland mall lah, bus stop also people will consider, or MRT. But people actually often forget to look at things like drop-off point, pick-up point, car park, whether it's near or far, whether it's sheltered, yada, yada, yada. So these are actually homework that you can do even before you open Property Guru. You can go to the estates that you kind of have an eye on, walk around the estate. You can even choose the blocks that you like. Then you target those blocks. So when I say choose the blocks that you like, maybe choose the block that is like a bit more private and doesn't face another neighbor's block. So sometimes you can actually guess all these things just by looking at the external, and you can also walk around in the corridor. So you can even see up to the point where, oh, I want this unit. This unit probably the service balcony doesn't look into another person's service balcony. That kind of thing. Some things you can actually do quite a lot of homework before you even reach out to any agent for viewing. So if you have the luxury of time, especially for all those people waiting to turn 35, I suggest you do this. It will actually help you in deciding your house choice lah. Like at least you already have a very targeted approach rather than an anyhow approach, and after that you're just full of regrets. Of course, if you don't really care about all these things, then up to you lah. But I'm just saying that these are the things that I collected from the people who bought a house the same time that I bought a house, and we share with each other lah our regrets and our processes. For myself personally, I would say my location was one of the main things that I really like about my house. But I actually still have one regret. So my house is about like, I don't know, 5 meters away from MRT. But I still have a regret. You know what's my regret? I regret that near my house, right, there is a Heartland Mall, but the Heartland Mall sucks. It does have the wet market, so actually we bought it because of the wet market lah. But the thing that I'm very sad about is that my house is not near any like nearby kopi shop, the like halal coffee that I can buy. Okay, actually that's not true. I can just walk across to WHC, which is the Woodlands Health Campus, and get something from Sup. So okay lah. That's an option for me lah. I forgot all about that. Okay lah. So my house is actually quite good lah. Okay, then that means my house, I have no regrets lah about the location. My house location is really, really very good. I don't have any complaints. Although I do complain that getting to Emerald MRT is a bit long-winded lah, but I mean, you cannot have it all, right? So yeah. Okay, so those are some of the things that I think people often overlook. So do consider that, and don't say like, oh, I drive now, then you only think about the car park. It's maybe, you don't know, you get into a financial situation where you need to sell your car. Maybe you become injured, you cannot drive car, which happened to my family member. Maybe you thought you never drive a car, but suddenly because of aging parents, you suddenly need a car, and then you think, oh, no need to consider car park, but suddenly you end up driving. So you never, I will advise you against all this, like, how to say, never assume that your life circumstances will never change. Never assume that your lifestyle will not change. So try to, especially if it's a forever home, and for most 35-year-olds it is, Most singles it is lah, because you're not going to buy sell. That one usually families, they like to buy small then upgrade bigger, right? But for singles who probably prefer to stay in one house for the rest of their life, to future-proof your decision, don't write off changing circumstances, changing ways of living, changing ways of transportation. Think about all these considerations. Okay, so that would be my suggestions when considering location, estate, block, which I also recommend for you to start looking at as soon as you want to lah. I think even before you turn 35, 1 year ago, one year before I turned 35, I was already very excited, but I could have spent all that time. I did actually spend all that time doing all this homework. And it actually helped me to narrow down in the vast estate of Woodlands. It actually helped me to narrow down what are the estates that I was aiming for. And actually that is also how I chose my current house lah, because I targeted that specific block. I wanted that specific block. I didn't realize that it came with a crap floor plan, but I will cover floor plans and the internals in another episode. So since this video is already like 10 minutes plus. Okay, see you in the next episode.